Welcome everyone to Enigma's Analysis. I'm your host, Mr. Enigma, and today we've got a division that largely covered the NFL's offseason headlines thanks to a certain quarterback and his doofy pseudo-pro wrestler tight end buddy. But there is oh so much else going on in the NFC South. Let's get right to it. First up, the Atlanta Falcons, a team that finished last year with 4 straight wins, including one over the eventual NFC champions, the San Francisco 49ers. So clearly they got it all together and they're gonna thrive this year, right? Well, hold the phone. Winning those last 4 games got them to a 7-9 record, just barely saving head coach Dan Quinn's job. Now look, if you're an Atlanta Falcons fan, I'm sure the last thing you want to hear about is me rambling about a 28-3 lead being blown in a Super Bowl from years ago. See, you can't separate the current state of the Atlanta Falcons franchise from the 28-3 lead being blown in the Super Bowl. That game is going to haunt Matt Ryan, Dan Quinn, and everyone else involved until the end of their days. Run the ball, no. That's pass play. Throw it away. Now, obviously, most of the faces of the franchise are still on the team, which has gotten worse year after year since that Super Bowl. Which makes sense to me because blowing a 28-3 lead in less than a half, to me, says your team sucks. Oh, no, I know. They had to get that lead on the Patriots in the first place, which means they must be really good, but not in my book. You blow a lead like that, you stink. Period. I do not give any credit to the Patriots for that. That is entirely on the Falcons. But anyway, I digress. I am actually kind of making a point here. Hard to imagine, I know. There's just a sense that Dan Quinn can't get it done with this team, that this franchise is not going to have any substantial success until they have a significant reboot. That's why the narrative that the previous season would be his last year made so much sense, because you could tell, Dan Quinn, your time in Atlanta's up. But then they surprised everybody at the end of the year, and now here we are yet again. But this isn't just some abstract thing. The Falcons have a lot of holes in their personnel. See, last year's draft was all about fixing up the offensive line, and in terms of the passing game, it seemed to have worked. Matt Ryan finished 3rd in the league in passing. Of course, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, and Austin Hooper no longer with the team because they've now downgraded to Mark Andrews. They all caught for a bazillion yards. All good, right? The offensive problem was the run game. The Falcons finished 30th in the league. Their attempt to fix that is to pick up Todd Gurley, the fantasy football darling of about 2 or 3 years ago. The narrative that Gurley is now some waste of space certainly isn't accurate. I mean, he ran for over 1,000 yards last season. He's still got gas left in the tank. But he's definitely not the running back who set the league on fire a few years ago, and he's not going to be again. Gurley isn't a star at this point in his career, and the fact that the Falcons thought that getting him would somehow solve their rushing issues is pretty perplexing. But Atlanta will probably be fine on the offensive side of the ball. The defense is where they're going to have issues. See, the whole defense is top-heavy. They really don't have a lot of depth at most positions. And that's especially problematic considering that even their starters are not an all-star lineup. They added Dante Fowler Jr. to add some much-needed help in the pass rush department, but then you look at their already not very good secondary, and things may have actually gotten worse. See, they lost Desmond Trufant in the offseason, and they may have reached a little bit in the draft to try to replace him. Starting a rookie at corner always comes with its own question marks, but you also have to consider that Isaiah Oliver, playing opposite him, has struggled himself. Meanwhile, at safety, yes, Keanu Neal is a great player when he's healthy, but he has not been healthy for any significant stretch of the last 2 seasons. Calling him injury-prone doesn't even begin to cut it. So you're left with a team whose realistic strategy for winning is have Matt Ryan pass to Julio Jones for a bazillion yards, which is something they've already been trying, and it's not a recipe for long-term success. Then you take away the contributions that Austin Hooper and Mohamed Sanu made, consider that someone is going to get injured on the defense, and in my book, you've got a 6-10 team. Sorry, Dan Quinn, you gotta go. Next up, the team with more personnel turnover than any other in the league, the Carolina Panthers. Yes, the Panthers are in full rebuild mode, and as we all know, the first year of a rebuild rarely goes well. Having said that, I definitely think this franchise needed a little bit of a reboot. I think it'll be good for them in the long run. Goal number 1 for the team, get it to the point where Christian McCaffrey, your star running back, doesn't have to do everything. If teams shut down McCaffrey, they beat the Panthers. It was as simple as that. Seriously. The guy does everything. Wait, Coach, you want me covering the guy in the slot? Alright, I guess I can jump in on defense for a few plays. Alright, well, if you want the team to have hot water again anytime soon, you're going to have to hand me that wrench over there. Alright, so DJ likes the crust cut off, Robbie wanted pickles on his, and does Teddy like Dijon or yellow mustard? So with new head coach in tow, it seemed like the Panthers' model for rebuilding was to use free agency on the offense and draft on the defense. Now, Carolina was really bad against the run last year, but again, since there's so many new faces, you kind of have to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. Don't take that as too much of a positive, though. There's a lot of guys who are going to have to prove themselves on the defense this year. Every single pick of the draft was spent on defense, and if you look at the roster, it's not exactly a list of names that pops. Even if the first round defensive tackle that they took explodes out of the gate, you gotta figure the defense is gonna be kind of a mess this year. So I guess the Panthers have to turn into offensive juggernauts if they're gonna win games. So offensively, Christian McCaffrey's a beast, and they got Robbie Anderson as their number one wide receiver. That's a great pickup. In fact, DJ Anderson, Curtis Samuel, that's a strong wide receiver core in general. They don't really have anybody at tight end, though. I have to admit, I assumed they were going to use a high draft pick to fix up the offensive line, which really wasn't very good last year. They did not, so we have to assume that's going to be the case again. Now under center, the Panthers have Teddy Bridgewater. I think he's a great choice for a young team in a rebuild. I imagine Teddy's a good locker room presence. He's not going to get himself into trouble. He's not going to turn the ball over a lot. We saw last year with the Saints that when Teddy's brought into a good offense, he can slip right in there and you won't lose much traction. However, since Carolina doesn't have a powerhouse defense and their offensive line's not that great, they're going to struggle to score points. Bridgewater's not a quarterback who does a great job of pushing the ball down the field. He's safe, he's conservative, and to a large degree, you got to figure that's what they want, especially after years of having banged up Cam Newton doing God knows what on the field. But the point is, he's going to need a lot of help from his skill position players to consistently score, which from time to time he'll probably be able to do. But that's not much of a recipe for an awesome season. That kind of sums it up with the Panthers. They're a new team. They're going to be sloppy this year, but they'll be headed in the right direction. 5-11 sounds right. Might be disappointing in the short term, but big picture, not so bad. And hey, at least you don't have Kyle Allen or an almost crippled Cam Newton at quarterback. The New Orleans Saints. Now, before we get into football talk, there's one thing we got to address about this team during the offseason. Actually, not about the team, about the quarterback, Drew Brees. So a couple weeks before the recording of this, Drew Brees publicly said that he would never agree with anyone protesting during the national anthem. Not his exact words, but that's the gist of it. Now, regardless of what you think of that opinion in and of itself, the crazy thing was he said it like 2 or 3 weeks after it became abundantly obvious that that was the most controversial thing you could possibly say. There was nobody who heard him say that who didn't think he was going to catch flack for it. It was one of the most tone-deaf things I've heard anyone say in a long time, and it showed a complete and utter inability to read the room. I mean, had the guy not turned on a TV or hopped online for 5 minutes in the prior 2 weeks? Apparently not, because he quickly threw out a couple apologies. But it makes you wonder, when else has Drew Brees been late to the party? I can't think of anything stupider than people wearing masks everywhere they go. Man, talk about a great time to be a female in politics. I bet you it won't be long before we have a woman president. Yeah, call it a hunch. It just feels like a great time to buy stock in United Airlines. Okay, back to football. There's actually not a ton of new stuff to say about the Saints. Their MO over the last few years has been complete dominance during the regular season, and then kind of sort of choking to a team they should probably beat in the playoffs. True to form, the Saints are solid at every position. I mean, they're poised to go on an absolute tear yet again this year. They grabbed Emmanuel Sanders to go along with Michael Thomas at wide receiver. They have a running back committee consisting of former NFL starters, despite the fact that they have Alvin Kamara, who's clearly a star in his own right. Jared Cook at tight end. Heck, during the first round of the draft, they took a center. Not because they needed a center, but just because, hey, we're the Saints. We don't really have any great positions of need. That center looks awesome. Why don't we grab him? So their O-line's great. Their defensive line's great. They were below average in pass defense last year. But oh wait, they got Malcolm Jenkins during the offseason. So I think it's utterly delusional to say that anyone other than the Saints are going to win the NFC South this year. And I imagine among New Orleans faithful, that fact is completely taken for granted. The real discussion becomes how far can they go in the playoffs. And look, this year, just like the last 3 years, there's no reason why the Saints can't go all the way. There's something less tangible going on here, and maybe this is a hot take, I don't know. But in my opinion, I don't think Drew Brees can get it done at this point in his career. Again, I'm talking in the playoffs. I've seen multiple high-stakes games where everything was kind of going the Saints' way early on and they were moving the ball down the field nicely, and then just out of nowhere, for no reason, Drew Brees tries to launch it down the field, completely failing to read some safety who's sitting there and gets the easy interception. Then that shifts the momentum of the game. The Saints eventually lose to some controversial call, and New Orleans fans are upset. Before you know it, we got a new rule. Again, to be clear, that's not saying that Drew Brees and company won't tear it up during the regular season. But you watch in the playoffs when the Saints are up against some powerhouse team like the 49ers or the Eagles or someone like that, Drew Brees will underperform. So I'm predicting a 12-4 record for the regular season, along with yet another head-scratching loss in either the division or conference finals. And lastly, we get to the team that gave its former starter to the Saints, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. See, the Bucs have a new lease on life now that Jameis Winston is not their starting quarterback. See, Jameis Winston was like an elementary school gym teacher. He wanted to make sure everyone got a turn catching the ball, even if that person's not on his team. Winston's strategy seems to be to hurl the ball down the field as hard as he can every single play. Thus, he led the league in every passing stat imaginable, both the good and the bad ones. I've read at least one interview where he blamed it on his eyesight. I'm sure that's not the real reason, but if it is, how the heck does the guy get around?
Sir, once again, this is a private residence. If you don't leave now, I'm going to have to call the authorities.
So now the Bucs have pretty much his polar opposite in the form of Tom Brady. Now many have speculated that the Bucs, had they not had Winston turning the ball over constantly, may have been a playoff team last year. So of course the thought process is get Brady in there. Even if he's not spectacular, he's still going to be better than Winston. Therefore the Bucs will be a playoff team.
Now, guys, listen, this is just a short pass play, all right? Neither team scores a touchdown. We move the ball like 3 to 5 yards. We run another play afterwards. It's great. You'll love it. No, the defense doesn't get the ball.
I don't entirely disagree with that premise, but it's important to look at what the Bucs are and what they aren't, rather than just saying, oh, Tom Brady, he's the GOAT, they're going all the way. In a lot of ways, the Bucs are the complete opposite of the Patriots. Their offensive line hasn't been very good in a long time, but they're absolutely loaded with offensive weaponry. They rarely have a good running game, and their pass defense stinks. Let's look at that a little further. The Bucs drafted an offensive tackle in the first round to try to fix up the offensive line. Obviously, one of Brady's big weaknesses is that he's not mobile. I don't think the Bucs have done enough to make the offensive line a good unit, but the trade-off is that Brady is Mr. Quick Release, and in previous years on the Patriots, he's done a lot to cover up deficiencies on that position. Wide receiver, he's going to have Evans and Godwin to throw to. Tight end, he's got Gronk, of course, who I have to figure is going to be more of a blocker at this point. But he's also got O.J. Howard. But for the first time in a while, Brady is going without a running game. Seriously, unless Brady's pre-snap reads really are that spectacular that he can just always spot whenever there's a good running play for Ronald Jones, I wouldn't expect the Bucs to do much in the running game. So the big thing becomes, can Brady avoid taking a pounding behind a not that great offensive line? It's also worth noting, though, that while it's huge that the Bucs won't be turning the ball over all the time, Winston's reckless play style did manufacture a lot of touchdowns. Even if Brady's everything Bucs fans hope he'll be, he's not going to generate as many points as Winston did, for better or worse. For the record, though, I'm not really concerned about Brady's arm strength. I'm sure it's fine. Boy, Brady being on the Bucs has really forced me to evaluate how much of my Patriots hatred is because of Bill Belichick and how much of it is because of Brady. I always hated how much Brady tried to maintain his golden boy image, so much so that he'd get passive aggressive with any reporter who ever called him on any of the Patriots' cheating ways, or just asked him a question he didn't like. I definitely despise Belichick more than Brady. So maybe I don't despise Brady on his own terms. I'm sure he's a nice enough guy. I do strongly dislike Gronk, though. I never forgot when he dropped his then steel-plated forearm onto the back of the neck of that one Bills player. He legitimately could have killed a guy, and he got suspended for 1 game. You know why he got suspended for 1 game? Because they had a big game against the Steelers the week after that. Jesse James caught that ball. Anyway, let's take a look at the Bucs defense, shall we? Now, because the Bucs defense had to constantly jump onto the field to cover for Winston's turnovers, there's a feeling that it's kind of hard to assess how good they actually were. They were first in the league in rush defense, and their front 7 is nasty. One glaring stat from last year, and this doesn't seem to have anything to do with Jameis Winston, was that they were 30th in the league in pass defense. So you would think that a huge offseason priority would be fixing up the pass defense, but not really. I mean, they drafted a safety in the 2nd round. But the Bucs defense is likely to continue to be vicious against the run and terrible against the pass. In a pass-heavy division like the NFC South, that's going to be problematic. So the Bucs have positions of exceptional strength and some that are real weaknesses. It also helps that they're under Bruce Arians, who's a great coach, although I swear if I hear one more analyst during the offseason say no risk it, no biscuit, I'm going to lose my mind. So I think the Bucs are going to be pretty good this year, but I do think they're going to struggle from time to time. In fact, I would go so far to say I think we're going to see a bit of everything from the Bucs this year. I think we're going to see games where they blow out their opponents. I think we're going to see games where they get blown out, and I think we're going to see some razor close games. Teams that do a particularly good job in the passing game or with rushing the quarterback are going to give them fits. But the Bucs will rip apart any team that doesn't have a good pass defense themselves. So if I think that they're going to go really far in the playoffs, or as a few people have said, win the Super Bowl, I think they have to become a more well-rounded team. Right now I've got the Bucs going 9-7, taking a wild card spot, and probably losing in the first round of the playoffs. Okay, so that's the NFC South. To recap, I've got the New Orleans Saints going 12-4 and winning the division. I've got the Tampa Bay Bucs going 9-7 and taking a wild card spot. I've got the Atlanta Falcons at 6-10 and the Carolina Panthers at 5-11. Let me know in the comment section what you think. Is there any way anyone other than the Saints win this division? Am I completely missing something about the Panthers, Falcons, or even the new Bucs with Tom Brady? Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Next week, we're going to wrap up these division videos with the NFC West. That's the 49ers, the Rams, the Seahawks, and the Cardinals, in case you were wondering. Enigma out.